In the small, sleepy town of Riverton, there was a place whispered about only in hushed tones. The house at the end of Millbrook Lane. It was an old Victorian mansion, once grand but now cloaked in shadows and decay. Its iron gates were rusted, and the overgrown garden was a tangle of weeds. No one had lived there for decades, and most residents avoided it, saying it was cursed. Emma Blake, a journalist known for her fearless curiosity, had heard the stories and was determined to uncover the truth behind the legends. Armed with a flashlight, a voice recorder, and her trusty notepad, she set out one foggy evening to explore the forsaken house. As Emma approached the mansion, the sky was a blanket of heavy gray clouds, and the fog seemed to thicken with every step she took. The front door, surprisingly intact despite its age, groaned as she pushed it open. A shiver ran down her spine as she crossed the threshold into the musty, dust-laden floor. The grand staircase loomed in front of her, its once polished wood now darkened and chipped. Emma hesitated, taking in the faded wallpaper and the cobwebs hanging like ghostly veils. She adjusted her flashlight and began her ascent, each step creaking ominously under her weight. On the second floor, Emma discovered a series of rooms, a library, a bedroom, and a study. The library was filled with ancient tomes, their covers worn and pages yellowed. In the bedroom, the bed was covered in dust, and old portraits of solemn faces hung on the walls. But it was the study that caught her attention. The study was cluttered with old books and scattered papers. An antique desk, heavy and dark, sat in the center of the room. Emma's flashlight illuminated a journal open on the desk. Its pages were filled with frantic, barely legible handwriting. Emma began to read aloud, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The journal belonged to Charles Whitmore, a man who had lived in the house in the early 1900s. His entries started innocuously, describing the renovation of the mansion and his excitement about his new home. But soon the tone changed. He wrote of hearing whispers at night, voices that seemed to come from nowhere. They spoke of dark secrets and unspeakable horrors. Charles' writings grew more erratic, detailing his growing paranoia and his belief that the house was alive, feeding off his fear. As Emma read, a chill settled over the room. The whispers she had read about seemed to echo in her ears, soft and disembodied. She turned around, her flashlight flickering, but saw nothing. The journal's final entry was scrawled in a trembling hand. "They are here. They want me to join them." Emma's heart raced, but she was determined to uncover more. She noticed a hidden door behind a bookcase. Her fingers traced the edge of the door, and with a deep breath, she pushed it open. The door creaked loudly, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The descent into the cellar was even colder. Emma's breath formed frosty clouds as she reached the bottom. The cellar was a vast, cavernous space filled with broken furniture and discarded belongings. The air was thick with the scent of rot and mildew. In the dim light of her flashlight, Emma saw an old, ornate mirror standing against the far wall. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, but its glass was oddly clear. She approached it cautiously, drawn by a compulsion she didn't understand. As she peered into the mirror, the atmosphere grew heavier, and the whispers became more insistent. The reflection in the glass was not just her own. Instead, she saw distorted faces, twisted in expressions of terror. They seemed to reach out from the mirror, their eyes wide with anguish. Emma stumbled back, her pulse pounding in her ears. The whispers turned into a cacophony of screams, and the mirror began to ripple like water. The faces in the mirror grew more desperate, their mouths moving in silent pleas. Emma tried to tear her gaze away, but it was as if the mirror was pulling her in. The house seemed to come alive with a malevolent energy. The walls groaned and shadows danced erratically. Emma's flashlight flickered wildly before going out entirely. The oppressive darkness seemed to press in on her, and the temperature dropped sharply. Just as she felt herself being drawn toward the mirror, the cellar door slammed shut, plunging her into complete darkness. Emma's frantic breathing was the only sound she could hear. She felt around in the pitch black, but the mirror's allure was inescapable. The faces in the glass were now so close they seemed to be right beside her. In a final, desperate act, Emma reached out and slammed her palm against the mirror. The glass cracked, and the anguished faces let out one final, unified scream. The mirror shattered, sending fragments cascading to the floor. The room fell silent, and the oppressive weight lifted slightly. When dawn broke, the mansion was eerily silent. Emma was gone, her flashlight and notepad left behind in the cellar. Her final notes, scrawled in frantic handwriting, lay on the floor. The mirror was a gateway I couldn't escape.